An hour of history from 8, starting with the re-examination of Custer's last stand in Mysteries of the Ancients. News now.
It's 7:30. I'm Kirsty Young. Tonight on 5 News, missing. Police hunt for 2 10-year-old friends. Britain's flagship prepares to up the pressure on Iraq as Saddam offers the Americans an olive branch. And tunes to die for. We bring you the top 10 funeral songs. So those are just some of the talking points we'll be debating this evening. And don't forget that you can add your thoughts by phone, text or email. You can email us at news@channel5.co.uk. You can text your opinions live to 5 on our short code. It's 83200, available now on all networks. That's 83200. And please remember to text the word 5 before your message. Or you could call our 5 News reaction line on 09050 555 555 and have your say in person. Good evening. All is forgiven, please come home. The message from the parents of 2 10-year-old friends missing now for more than 24 hours. Police say they're extremely concerned for the safety of best friends Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells. The pair were last seen near Holly's home at Soham in Cambridgeshire at around 6:30 yesterday evening. Roland Burke now reports.
The search for the missing girls went on through the day. Hundreds of concerned local people walked through the fields and woods around Soham, backed up by American soldiers from a local airbase. Jessica Chapman on the left and Holly Wells, who are both 10, have now been missing for more than 24 hours. They spent the day together yesterday and had gone to play in Holly's bedroom. When her mum and dad went to check on them, they'd vanished. Holly and Jessica's parents joined police to appeal for information about their daughter's whereabouts.
Their disappearance is incredibly out of character. They haven't been missing before. Very well balanced, very bright young girls. As far as we can tell, they've taken no change of clothing and no money. So as we say, it's quite out of character.
Holly's parents were asked if it was likely that they'd run away.
Not at all. When Leslie said it's out of character, it most certainly is for both girls.
Holly and Jessica were both wearing red Manchester United tops with Beckham on the back when they vanished, and police are hoping someone might have seen them. Their parents say anything the youngsters think they might have done wrong is forgiven. They just want their little girls home. Roland Burke, 5 News.
Pressure on Iraq is intensifying tonight as America's military planners calculate the forces they'll need to destroy Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction and remove him from power. The Iraqi dictator invited US politicians and arms inspectors to see for themselves and visit Baghdad. The White House immediately rejected the offer. Now Britain's most powerful warship, HMS Ark Royal, is preparing to head for the Middle East. 5's James Bays now reports.
HMS Ark Royal, the Royal Navy's flagship, which will soon be heading towards the Mediterranean. The official line is that the country's biggest aircraft carrier, which is equipped with Harrier jump jets and Sea King helicopters, is taking part in exercises which were planned months ago. But some military experts believe those exercises will put Ark Royal in just the right place to move on to the Gulf and to take part in any war against Saddam Hussein.
The fact that it's going to the Eastern Mediterranean, where it would be handy for the Gulf, I think is probably no coincidence. And we have to remember that the Ark Royal is now the premier ship in the fleet. It's bigger than the other 2 aircraft carriers. It's just had its major refit. It's a command centre. So it is the flagship of the fleet which is being sent.
America's now determined that the Iraqi leader should be removed from power. In any military operation, Britain will almost certainly be involved. But how do you get rid of one of the world's most feared dictators? America may supply arms and intelligence to Iraqi opposition forces. However, these groups are far from united and probably don't have the muscle to remove Saddam. Another option is the use of special forces like the SAS in a surprise commando raid. However, Saddam is well guarded. He has more than 30 palaces and a number of doubles. The last option is a massive invasion similar to the last Gulf War, but generals believe this would need the participation of about 250,000 troops. As the Ark Royal prepares to leave, the longest-serving MP in the Commons says Parliament must urgently be recalled.
Well, I think it would be a catastrophe to launch into an attack described by Field Marshal Lord Bramall as a long and messy war in the Middle East, opening Pandora's box.
In Baghdad, Iraqis today demonstrated against any military action by the West. Saddam has offered to let UN weapons inspectors into his country. Today he extended the invitation to US congressmen, but many Western diplomats believe he's just playing for time. James Bayes, 5 News.
Meanwhile, it's been another day of violence in Israel. A car exploded at a road junction in the north of the country, killing one person and injuring another. Police say it appeared that the dead passenger was a Palestinian militant who'd hitched a lift near the West Bank. It's claimed he'd been on his way to carry out an attack. The blast came a day after 13 people were killed in a suicide attack on an Israeli bus and a shooting in East Jerusalem. So, with the bombs still exploding and the death toll still rising, should the Bush administration concentrate on the crisis in the Middle East rather than train their sights on Saddam Hussein? And how would the Arab world react to a Get Saddam campaign whilst a US-backed Israeli army occupies towns in the West Bank? Well, with me to discuss this and the rest of the day's news, I'm joined by Julia Hartley-Brewer from the Sunday Express and broadcaster and journalist James O'Brien. Welcome to you both. Complex issues both, and we're talking about them together. So let's for a moment just separate them and go first of all to Iraq, that we saw a few minutes ago in our report. America has turned down Saddam's apparently open offer today. Julia, what are we to make of that?
Well, I mean, these open offers, we've had an awful lot of these over the years, haven't we? At the end of the day, the weapons inspection should have been in a long, long time ago. They were thrown out many, many years ago, and they think that, I think the view is that Saddam Hussein is just playing games. It's a bit of a diplomatic game to sort of string things along as much as possible. He's getting very, very worried indeed that something's actually going to happen in the military front, and this is just gamesmanship.
Is it enough, James O'Brien, for Donald Rumsfeld to say simply they are lying? They do have biological and nuclear weapons, even though we've got no published documentation. There's no UN resolution. There's been no parliamentary vote here in Britain.
Well, I don't want to sound crass, but it depends whether or not you believe Rumsfeld, doesn't it? I mean, it's certainly in George Bush's interest to go in and, well, let's not forget, finish off the job that his father failed to finish. If his father had failed to finish, acted upon a proper UN Security Council resolution with a full international mandate, if he'd actually finished the job, this wouldn't have happened. It's got contempt for the citizen. That's what worries me. I mean, every citizen, be he Christian, Jewish or Muslim, and America has plenty of all three, as we know, to actually say, listen, he's lying, trust us, we'll just go and remove him, we'll kill Iraqi citizens in the process, we'll kill certainly tens of thousands of Iraqi soldiers, but you have to take my word for everything, which is what the Americans are saying.
Without wishing to be too conspiratorial here, do you think there's a sense of political expediency in which it's easier for the Bush administration to address the problem of Saddam Hussein than it is for them to address the problem of Israel?
Yes, and I also think it's easier for them to address the problem of Saddam Hussein than the problem of Osama bin Laden, who, as far as I'm aware, they're still supposed to be hot on the trail of. American voters are going to start asking as next elections approach, what happened to this war against terrorism? Where are these sort of demonised Arab baddies that you promised you'd be lining up against a wall? It hasn't happened. It's very expedient.
Julia?
I would have thought there's still a lot of support in America for taking on Saddam Hussein. He is, without a question, he is a threat to the region in the Middle East. He's a threat to the world. He's definitely a threat to America. There's no doubt about that. The question is, how do you handle him, and what happens after him? How much
fills
worse?
the vacuum?
How much worse could it be? That's the question. At least we know what we're dealing with Saddam Hussein.
If he's not removed with massive, real Arab support for American action, which isn't going to happen, as long as they're perceived to be continuing decades of favouritism in Israel. That's the Pandora's box that Tam Dale is talking about, and Lord Bramwell. I think they're wrong to overlook the fact that Pandora's box could be kept closed. You could go and sort out Saddam Hussein and keep the Arab world happy, but I've got very little faith in the current American regime of having really the wit and sophistication of being able to do those two very difficult
But they
things.
really could get so many Middle East countries on their side, like Jordan and Saudi Arabia, these crucial, incredibly powerful and very rich countries on their side, if they did sort out the Palestinian issue. It's just got to be solved. The 21st century, this has been going on for far too long, and it's got to be solved. And America is the only country that's powerful enough to actually have the might to force Israel to back down and sort something out.
Well, of course, in theory it is, because it could turn off the tap of funding, but we've seen a distinct lack of the possibility that they're about to bring it to some sort of resolution in recent years, and God knows they've tried hard enough.
Well, there's an argument that certainly Bill Clinton, who tried harder than anybody to bring it about and was desperate to sort of have this as a crowning glory of his administration in terms of foreign policy, and he failed. But, under different leadership, for instance, of the PLO, and things could happen, things could change, but someone has got to force their hand, and there's only one person who can do it, and that's George Bush.
I'm not sure they need to solve everything in Israel. I think it's more about perception. I don't want to be overly cynical, but you know, Irish people are still effectively at war with each other. We talk about a successful peace process. It's important that other Arab countries, including the ones Julia has mentioned, perceive America to be moving at least in a direction they approve of. They're not going to be able to solve the problems there overnight, and they are not going to be able to solve them before they take action against Saddam. But it's all about how they're perceived to feel about the role of Israel in the world and about the equality of Arabs in that part of the world.
What about our role in all of this, Julia? We saw there in James Bay's report the fact that HMS Ark Royal is inching out towards the Mediterranean. We have not been told, but we can assume on its way to the Gulf.
Yeah, well, word is, you know, we've promised 25,000 troops to join with 250,000 American troops. Well, there's not that much support for it among the British public. There's certainly not a lot of support for it on the Labour backbenches, and there's also quite a lot of question marks over it in the cabinet. I mean, people like Claire Short, the International Development Secretary, could well resign if we go to war. Certainly there should be a debate, there should be a public debate and debate in Parliament about it. But the question is, Tony Blair actually has a very, very important role in tempering the sort of the worst excesses of the hawks in the White House. So we do want, in a way, to be involved, and we do have influence here. But the question is, even after this report last week on weapons in the British Army, can we even go to war? Are we even fit to fight a war?
If Tony Blair really enjoyed this fantastic relationship, if he was really in a position to urge caution against the dogs of war in the White House, then he would be able to do so without offering military support. If he had this international statesman-like presence that a lot of people have claimed, Julia's not the first person I've heard claim it, then he would be able to say to George Bush, I think you should do things this way, without having to send 25,000 of our troops to back up a war that 51% of the country apparently don't want to see happen.
OK, as always, the clock has beaten us on this one, but there is still lots more to talk about, because coming up here on 5 News, the cycle tax for drivers, why motorists will have to fund insurance for cyclists. And apparently this song is to die for. We bring you the alternative top 10 funeral tunes, and there isn't a hymn amongst them. All that plus the rest of the day's news after the break. Do stay with us.
Does this dress make me look fat?
No, your fat makes you look fat.
Caution. Kenko rapport may bring out the real you.
It's always difficult to end a relationship, especially one that's lasted for so long. But there comes a time when you just have to be brave and make that call. Hello? Yeah, is that the NHS smoking helpline?
Need help giving up? Call 0800 169 0169.
Nothing is more comfortable than Charmin Comfort. It's the most cushiony soft toilet paper there is. Charmin.
Again, this is 5 News. The time right now is 7:42. Let's take a look at tonight's top story. Police are extremely concerned for the safety of 2 10-year-old friends who've been missing for more than 24 hours now. Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells were last seen yesterday evening near Holly's home at Soham in Cambridgeshire. Now, it's well known that drivers and cyclists frequently share Britain's roads with less than good grace, while proposals from Europe could crank that animosity up a few gears. Under the planned legislation, car drivers in the UK could be made responsible for any accident involving a cyclist, even if it isn't the motorist's fault. The European Commission says drivers are nearly always to blame for accidents and do far more damage. The motoring organisation, the RAC, says the move would be a charter for bicycle guerrillas. But not surprisingly, cyclists are delighted. Well, still with me in the studio, Julia Hartley-Brewer from the Sunday Express and broadcaster and journalist James O'Brien. Plus, we are also joined in this debate by Patrick Field. He's from the London School of Cycling. Welcome, Patrick. Thanks for joining us this evening. You must be really chuffed about this news. Somebody else coughing up for your mistakes?
Well, I carry third-party insurance. If you join a cycling organisation in this country, you get £1 million worth of third-party insurance for free. And insurance companies don't give things away for nothing. So I think there's a bit of an alarmist talk about this, because to do a lot of damage on a push bike, you have to be spectacularly creative. In general, there's not, this it might be up to £50. I think it's a bit of a silly season story, really.
Do you think, are you saying then it's going to be a good thing for drivers? Do you think it's going to make drivers more aware because they'll be more careful?
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem for motorists is not OPEC or the oil companies or Gordon Brown or Ken Livingstone or traffic wardens or cyclists. The problem for motorists is basically other people doing exactly what they're doing.
Right.
Yes, and anything that gets, you know, the problem with, you know, I'm very sympathetic to people who have to drive motor vehicles, and one of their main problems is the way that they're kind of isolated from any sense of community. You know, we live in cities so we can be near each other, you know, but if you're a victim of motor dependence, you know, you see the other people in the city as a problem. And actually, I think measures like this, you know, actually enforce a kind of collective spirit on people who are forced to drive cars and help them to think a bit more carefully. There'll be less congestion because there'll be less crashes if people are more careful.
Patrick, I don't know what world you're living in, but I do not imagine all sorts of car drivers getting out of their cars and giving the cyclists a great big hug when they find out that, well, it's the RAC that said there's going to be an average of 50 quid on everybody's insurance bills.
But of course the RAC, you know, it's a sectional interest. They would say that, wouldn't they? But no, what I'm talking about is congestion, you know, and a big part of congestion is unnecessary speeding. You know, if the traffic...
There's no speeding in London at the moment.
No, but people try and speed all the time. You know, if you're trying to get out of a side road in a car and the traffic is going at 50 kilometres an hour, it's much harder to get out than if the traffic is going at 15 kilometres an hour. That's why the 50-mile-an-hour speed limit on the M25 makes the traffic flow more smoothly.
Julia Hartley-Brewer, that's a very interesting point that Patrick's making, that actually, you know, you can't cause that much damage with a bike. It's the cars that cause the problems.
You can cause a lot of damage with a bike. I don't know a single driver in London, certainly in many other capital cities, who hasn't had an experience with a cyclist. The thing about cyclists is they don't want equal rights with drivers. They want super-duper rights. They want to be extra special. They want to have no insurance, no tax. They don't want to have know the highway code. They certainly don't want to have to obey the highway code. They want to be able to pay what everyone else has to give way to them. They're going to go through red lights. I don't know any drivers who haven't had that experience. Now, I've cycled in London and various other cities, and certainly I always worked on the basis that everyone was out to kill me. I think it's a much more safer way of driving. But I do say, getting around the country and being alive at the end of the journey. But I do think that cyclists are expecting way too much, and the idea that drivers are always to blame when cyclists regularly go through red lights, regularly they go on the pavement when the lights are against them. I mean, there's totally unacceptable behaviour by most cyclists, I think, in most cities.
Patrick, I don't want to seem like we're all out to get you, but
I'm not.
Yes, we are. You're not.
No,
You go ahead.
No, I'm not. But I think, Patrick, you've defeated your own argument in a way by saying that you've got third-party insurance. If every cyclist causing trouble on the streets of London or whatever city Julia happens to be biking around approach it with the same responsibility that you have, and accepting, when you talk about community spirit, why should only the car drivers be so community spirited as to have third-party insurers? It's the law, but you don't get any sense of cyclists wanting.
But when you talk about every cyclist on the streets of the city causing troubles, to talk about cyclists and motorists is a bit banal, really. We're all people, however we choose to travel. Yeah. We're all city dwellers. We want to live in a beautiful city.
So we should all take road
if you look at the Netherlands, 1 in 4 bicycle journeys in the Netherlands is undertaken by a female pensioner, which has fantastic benefits for public health, for social inclusion, for everybody's standard of living. The reason why, there are many reasons why female pensioners in this country don't cycle as much, but I would guess that one reason is the idea, if not the fact, that there's a high volume of motor traffic. Yes. And the motor traffic is bad tempered.
But the motor traffic, by the way, is paying for the roads that you are cycling
on. That's a completely fallacious argument.
Cycle lanes wouldn't even exist without the road tax.
There's no such thing as road tax in this country, my dear. There hasn't been since 1932. You're making yourself look stupid with ignorance.
No, you don't have MOT.
No, of course I don't. If I drive a car, I'll get an MOT, but if I ride a push rod,
there's no fire in my push rod. Lights. I mean,
there
are some basic rules of the road, which, I mean, pedestrians don't get knocked over as much as cyclists do in big cities, because they actually obey the rules of the road. Cyclists think they have a God-given right to be in the middle of the road, and every single driver watching this is going to be agreeing with me.
Yeah, I haven't come here to defend everybody who rides a bicycle. Sure, riding a bicycle doesn't make you a sensible person.
Would it be a good idea?
No, but if you want to talk about the law, if you want to talk about the law, let's look at the history of highway law. The AA was formed to break the speed limit. This summer, when the government said it's a bad idea for people to use mobile phones while driving a motor vehicle, what did the RAC say? Said, well, you can ban them, but it will be unenforceable.
Well, let me ask you a little bit.
Three-quarters of motorists admit to breaking the speed limit.
Okay, let me ask you about the idea that cyclists should have to pass a test. I mean, they're using the highways like everybody else. Wouldn't it be sensible that cyclists should have to pass the test as the same test as I had to pass to get behind the wheel of a car?
No, a bicycle weighs 10 kilos. You know, I think there should be more. There should, excuse me. I think there should be more training for cyclists. You know, and I think it's. If you look at countries where this kind of legislation works well, the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, cyclists. You know, the concept of cyclist doesn't even exist. It's people on bicycles, and those people in general. You know, there's a better standard of cycling.
Okay.
But and I would encourage that. But you know, they can't even collect all the road tax from. Or vehicle excise duty, as it should be correctly called.
Road tax.
Yeah, no.
Anyway,
They don't
Patrick,
call the tax on alcohol pub tax, my dear.
Thanks for joining us, Patrick.
You know,
before we move on, let me just tell you that if you cycle regularly, as Patrick was hinting at there, you are likely to have a level of fitness of somebody 10 years younger and 5 times more likely to live longer than that of a motorist. So everybody get on your bike tomorrow. Okay, let's turn our attentions to some of the other news making the headlines this evening. And 250,000 immigrants are coming to this country every year. That's enough people to fill a city the size of Stoke-on-Trent. The numbers come from right-wing think tank Migration Watch UK, and they've been splashed across today's front pages. The group says it just wants to start a debate, but critics claim the figures are wildly overblown. Nearly 90 people are now suspected of having Legionnaire's disease after the biggest outbreak of the infection for a decade. It's still thought the source of the outbreak was the air conditioning system at a leisure centre in Barrow-in-Furness. Production in Britain's factories has suffered its biggest fall for more than 20 years. The manufacturing industry suffered a 5.3% drop in June. Economists say it could be down to the long Jubilee bank holiday, but there's a chance that workers watching the World Cup could also be behind the slump in the country's production power. The new Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, has been made an honorary druid at the traditional Eisteddfod festival of Welsh culture. He insists he's not a pagan, saying being made a druid is one of the greatest honours that a Welshman could receive. When you face the final curtain, what would the tune you'd like to play be as music for the ultimate chill-out experience changes? Out goes Abide With Me, and in comes Another One Bites the Dust. One chain of undertakers today published its top 10 funeral pop songs as funeral directors face up to the fickle finger of pop. Keith Doyle has been checking out the funeral charts.
In death, like most things in life, we're faced with choices. The choice of funeral flowers says a lot about the dearly departed, but more and more the same individuality is being used in the choice of funeral music. A survey by the Co-op's funeral service found that pop songs are now a favourite for funerals, putting a whole new meaning into popping your clogs. The survey found the top 5 to die for are, at number 5, fittingly, Angels. Tina Turner is at number 4 with Simply the Best. A heartbreaker at number 3, I Will Always Love You, Whitney Houston. At number 2, from Titanic, My Heart Will Go On, Celine Dion. The number 1 choice is Bette Midler, The Wind Beneath My Wings. Of course, not everybody wants a tearjerker. Maybe the choice of Wham's Wake Me Up Before You Go Go is wishful thinking, and it's hard to work out the thinking behind the choice of the ITV News at 10 bongs.
What's good for you is not necessarily good for somebody else. We've had anything from the Lambeth Walk all the way up to Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. We wouldn't necessarily refuse to do anything. It's the family's wishes that we need to consider.
Well, when I die, I'd like something that really makes them boo-hoo. You know, like the one out of Ghosts.
Basically, I don't remember who sang it, but I love to have that we will rock you.
More and more people are now realising they can choose the music for their funerals, so we may be hearing a lot more of the News at 10 bongs or Wham. As for my choice, well, I'm going to be optimistic and choose Knocking on Heaven's Door. Keith Doyle, 5 News.
James and Julia are still with us. I didn't believe this story at all until we started speaking to people on the streets, and they said they want We Will Rock You. Is it a loss of dignity or a welcome injection of humour?
Fantastic. The only people I think it's going to upset are sort of dyed-in-the-wool old clerics, because who is a funeral for? It's really ever so slightly for the person that's died, but it's for the people that have been left behind.
That's interesting.
They should be trying to reflect
Julia, because the funeral director was saying, you know, these are the songs the family has chosen. So it seems quite often that actually it's not the person who's in the box that's chosen the tunes, it's the family having a bit of a laugh.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, I would have thought that being 6 feet under, one of the few benefits of that was that you didn't have to hear Celine Dion.
Yeah, that's
but
the worry.
that's, you know, it's a personal choice.
That's right. I was thinking you could, if any of those first three, Bette Midler, Whitney Houston, I shall come back and haunt any family member of mine that puts that on my playlist.
Do you think it all sort of began with Princess Diana's funeral and Elton John playing it? That sort of, because a lot of people who were dreading it actually thought he made a pretty good job of it, Julia.
I think it makes funerals much more accessible, especially if like someone young dies. I think a child's favourite tune or something. I mean, you know, awful occasions, but you know, make it meaningful and personal.
Okay, as always, you have been busy messaging us with your thoughts on all the day's talking points. Thanks very much for getting in touch. Here's a selection of the very latest. This is what you had to say on our main debate, whether President Bush should focus his efforts on Israel or Iraq. Ilsley Woodley in Reading has sent a text message saying there is enough conflict in Israel without going to war with Iraq on top of it. We've had another text saying that Saddam's new mobile facilities for weapons of mass destruction pose new threats. The viewer says that because inspections will fail, a preemptive strike is the least risky option. And another 5 News viewer sent a message saying America should forget Israel and sort out its own problems. You've also been calling our reaction line. Sue Beale from Morley called us to say it's time that America got its own country in order instead of interfering elsewhere and causing mayhem. And Mrs. Stevens from Nottingham says President Bush should sort out the Middle East crisis before he gets involved with Iraq. Thanks very much for all your calls, emails and texts. That's it for now. Thanks too to my guests. They were Julia Hartley-Brewer and James O'Brien. We have, of course, got updates throughout the evening, but for now, from me and everyone on the 5 News team, thanks for watching. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Good night.
Channel 5 Weather, sponsored by approvedcarfinance.co.uk.
Good evening. Well, it's been a real day of contrast across the whole of the UK. Parts of the southeast, particularly East Anglia, have seen almost an inch of rain, while parts of western Scotland, as you can see on the map, without too much cloud about, saw a lovely 27 degrees in the early part of this afternoon. Not too much cloud about this evening for many areas. In fact, some gaps appearing round about the eastern fringes of Scotland. But where that cloud cover sticks around, it'll keep that warmth just neatly tied in. Temperatures anything up to about 13 degrees, very average for this time of year. I'm expecting some showers just to drift into northern parts of Ireland and perhaps make their way just gently across into parts of the mainland. Again, they'll just be rather drizzly. As we come further south, plenty of clouds sticking around, making it a warm and sticky night just about everywhere. Again, showers lingering in the far southeast, but much quieter and lighter than the ones we've seen earlier in the day. Not too much around by the way of thunder and lightning. Temperatures in the south ending between 16 and 14 degrees. Now, as we go into tomorrow, that picture changing again. Plenty of sunshine across the whole of the map. In a couple of places, those you can see in the far northwest, mixed with those thundery heavy showers, but a good deal of sunshine nonetheless, and feeling rather sticky up to about 21. As we come further south into central parts around the borders, plenty of sunshine mixed with the odd bit of cloud, and then in parts of northern Wales and the southwest, again cloudy, but with a good deal of sunshine. Ireland will see some of the worst of the rain, as will parts of the southeast. Again, those showers rather heavy. Watch out if you're out driving on the roads. Temperatures in the south anything between 22 and 24 degrees. Here's a look at the outlook for the rest of the day. Showers in the very southeast, mostly dry, elsewhere mist and fog developing and quite mild.
Approved Car Finance, sponsors of Channel 5 Weather, come rain or shine.
You have no experience in war, do you?
I've fired a few shots.
You're always going to be tearing away at yourself until you come to terms with what you are. This fighting machine.
Who are you?
The worst.
Rambo 3, Wednesday at 10 on Channel 5.
You are nothing! If you were in my toilet bowl, I wouldn't bother flushing it. My bath mat means more to me than you.
Over the rainbow, way up high.
You see this? This means more to the office than you, and yet... These pencils more important. These pens more important.
Just keep thinking of your happy place. Channel 5 Extreme Movies, Saturdays after Law and Order.
The Virgin Queen Elizabeth I is profiled in half an hour. Until then on 5, the truth at last about Custer's last stand.